Well, we are always defenders of freedom. We believe in freedom. But if you check history, what you will find is that in many years, especially in Latin America, which way back from when President Monroe developed his Monroe Doctrine, we have the right to own Latin America, and we will tell any government there what we want to happen. That's the simple truth. So throughout our history, we have overthrown many, many governments. We didn't like their form of government. In the case of Chile in 1973, what you had is an election in which a guy named Salvador Allende won the election. Problem is, Nixon and his friends didn't like him. Why? Because Salvador Allende fought for the poor people and the working people of that country. He believed that the resources of Chile, their copper mines and so forth, should belong to the people. And he won a free election. No one denied that for a second. It was a tough election, didn't win by much, but he won a free election. There was another election. His party got more support. He was overthrown by the CIA and corporate interest, because corporate interest preferred, of course, that the United States companies dominate that country. And a lot of what politics is about, going way, way back to the 19th century, through England, France, is the domination of colonies so that big companies in a given country can take the resources of those countries for their own use. So I think that's what happened, and it was a very unfortunate day in American history. Allende won in a democratic election, was popular, was overthrown, and eventually killed. And in his place, a guy named General Pinochet took place, ran that country with an iron fist, killed many, many people, but he was okay. He was a good guy. Why? Because he was a friend of corporate America.
Howdy, folks. Bernie Sanders there, a little bit of classic Bernie. That's Bernie from, I believe, 2003. Just put the date on that for you. Episode 102, Left Reckoning. I'm going to kill that just in case it's muting me. Matt Leck here. David Griscom currently in the air, currently in the skies. Pete Buttigieg was not able to keep him down, so he'll be returned to August. Hello, everyone. I wanted to thank everybody up top who came out to the show. I apologize if I was a little bit too gone on Joe Snuffy's whiskey, but I really enjoyed myself. It was great seeing everybody. It was very fun. It was too much fun. I need to watch myself. What I haven't realized is I haven't been drinking during COVID, which I just stopped. I got out of the habit. Because mainly I only do it out of the house, and my tolerance is gone. But I had been there for about. Anyway, besides the alcohol content, it was a pretty great show. I got to say hi to a bunch of people. The venue, we had a little bit of. I don't want to badmouth it. It was a very nice place. Little bit of a snafu with scheduling stuff with the meet and greet, which you don't like to hear, but nonetheless, we despite getting shushed, we were able to have a meet and greet upstairs. But yeah, it was very fun. It was great to see David, Ben, Jason, Bhaskar, Sam, Emma too, of course. See them every day though. But it was a lot of fun. Yeah, so I'll stop gushing about that a little bit. Because I do not remember how I got home. If somebody paid for my Lyft, thanks for that, and I'll get you if you can improve that, because I legit don't remember. So yeah, Bernie up top there. I have a short convo with Andrew of the Lever. Of course, Tom from Yakubia. Of course, I'll always talk about JFK. With Andrew about the this Pfizer basically renting. People would be familiar with sponsored content. Basically, an advertiser comes in and say, "Hey, your newspaper is very strapped for cash. How about you give me all like the fun formatting stuff to make my ad look like real news, and I pay you a little bit more for that." How Pfizer's doing that, and also Pete Buttigieg, but I also wanted to talk a little bit about Bernie Sanders is the incoming chair of the Labor Committee, and now it's Health, Education, Labor, and Pensions, I believe. That's a good thing. It's going to be very interesting to see what he's able to do with that. Of course, it would be a truer test if the House wasn't controlled by Republicans, and Democrats had to find better excuses. This is again like the real sort of win-win. Is like if the Democrat like Bernie can do something in a position like that, let's see it, and if he can't, well, it's good to know too. But I want to talk about something he's doing with regards to Howard Schultz. But first, and this is something we've hinted at before, David and I, and something we'll talk about, I think, going forward. Alex Press, when she was on Majority Report with Emma, also, this is a context I feel like leading with before we get into other unionization things. So Jonah Furman at Labor Notes, but this is in Jacobin. I wrote about the latest Bureau of Labor Statistics report on union membership in the U.S. By the numbers are still quite firmly in an era of union decline, with almost every union, every industry, and every state facing more or less dramatic declines in unionism. I think there are plenty of ways to think differently about the U.S. labor movement. The militant minority may be growing. Unionism is extending into new sectors. The changing shape of the economy is large. At large is a huge factor, but the bigger decades-long context of that is decline. Also, somebody Dave and I should get on is Doug Henwood, who points out this graph here. Union density keeps falling. As it has for 37 of the last 50 years, the share of the workforce belonging to a union, aka union density, fell in 2022. It's risen in only 4 years in that span. It was unchanged in 9. The grim history reported this morning by the Bureau of Labor Statistics, the graph below. I also find it interesting, you see that public union chart there. And I would just say that is one reason, among many others, why I wouldn't attack a teachers union for standing up for their COVID safety protocols at this time. But I won't get sidetracked into that. There's a story in Bloomberg here that was very interesting on the Howard Schultz front. Starbucks baristas are unionizing. Even Howard Schultz can't make them stop. Even Howard Schultz, even the guy who had the idea of NFTs, can't, the genius. I mean, he's a billionaire that got BTFO'd of the Dem primary in a very short time. But, even he couldn't do this. Great section here. A month earlier, Starbucks convened a hand-picked group of about 20 baristas from Southern California in a conference room in Long Beach for what sounds like one of history's less fun 3-hour pizza parties. Basically, it was a focus group. They spent the first hour watching Schultz's speech from earlier that week. I wonder if it had the this is like a train to Dachau, and we all need to share a blanket. If he kept that in the pitch, or if he maybe started omitting that. Basically, it was a focus group. They spent the first hour watching Schultz's speech from earlier that week. Then Schultz himself entered the room and took a seat in their circle of folding chairs. A monitor asked the employees to react to a list of potential grievances, such as our stores are short-staffed. Then use sticky notes to mark up the wall with ways the company could improve things. Oh, that's fun. That's how public. The meeting got tense when one of the invited employees, Madison Hall, shout out to Madison Hall. Genuinely, this is impressive to take this moment. I think having a union behind it. Well, let me just finish reading this paragraph before I give props. But the meeting got tense when one of the invited employees, a union activist named Madison Hall, asked Schultz to speak about the company's retaliation against organizers. In response, the CEO accused the union of disrupting a recent memorial service for an employee. The union denies that. I wonder who I believe, which he said reflects the disrespect of an organization that doesn't know who we are. So just regardless of if like Howard Schultz did a surprise last minute scheduling of a memorial when he found out union people were going to be speaking somewhere, which is what I imagine, like if anything remotely close to this happened, and he's not just lying, which I imagine is another strong possibility. Disrespect. What's disrespectful is not giving your unions a contract. That's disrespectful. That's all I really care about. I don't know what we're talking about here anymore. Like this, oh, you scheduled something in an insensitive way. Bro, you're talking about NFTs. Which you said, the disrespect of an organization that doesn't know who we are. Yeah, it's that you're the boss that they're unionizing against. Then he returned to themes of the speech, the invitees had just watched. His childhood could not give a fuck, bro. His quest to do better. Ooh, yeah. How about sign some contracts? The good perks. Hall, sitting a few feet away, told Schultz that tuition-free college is great, but doesn't pay the rent. I mean, that's just absolutely true. I'm sensing a lot of anger from you about Starbucks, Schultz told Hall. If you hate Starbucks so much, why don't you work somewhere else? Starbucks told Schultz, wrote that Schultz aimed to bring the focus of the meeting to the task at hand. Ooh, Taskmaster. That's nice. Yeah, sorry, David's out today. After the activists attempted to divert it. Like instead of just our feel good, sticky note exercise of things that don't actually demand anything of me, a boss. Let's bring it back to the task at hand of take the sticky note and maybe do a sad face, because that's what you're being. You're being a sad face. Bernie Sanders writes, and I don't want to read this whole letter. I do want to read this whole letter, but I'm not going to. I write to express my serious concerns over Starbucks' concerted and relentless campaign against its workers' efforts to organize. The National Labor Relations Act declares it to be policy of the United States to encourage collective bargaining. Nice of that to be on the books. Workers have a fundamental right to organize and participate in workplace democracy without fear. Sorry, I switch screens. Let me make this a little bit bigger. Without fear of employee interference or retaliation. Unfortunately and unacceptably, Starbucks has shown flagrant disregard for those fundamental freedoms and has engaged in a pattern of egregious and lawful behavior. Therefore, I urge you to immediately halt your union-busting campaign. And he goes into all the unfair practices filed against them, the Jazz Brizak unlawful termination. Jazz Brizak appeared on Majority Report. You should go check that out. Mr. Schultz, Starbucks has continued to delay tactics and pending cases both before the NLRB and in the federal courts, as well as in bargaining with the union. It has been nearly 400 days since the first Starbucks union was certified by the NLRB, and yet you and your company have refused to bargain a first contract in good faith. Instead, you have approached bargaining sessions with increasingly intense obstacles that include shutting down pro-union stores. Yes, and puts in the context of this risk should not be difficult. Starbucks is a $122 billion corporation. In the first 9 months of last year, Starbucks made $3.3 billion in profits, had enough money to provide its outgoing CEO, Kevin Johnson, with a $60 million golden parachute on top of his 39% pay raise. I mean, that's a golden parachute. That is more than that's fucking Steven Crowder turned down over 4 years. While Starbucks workers have risked their health and well-being to make your company successful during the pandemic, you became $800 million richer and are now worth $3.8 billion. There's a story here that I also have linked below in the description that I want to shout out by journalist Isabella Escalona. This is focusing on Starbucks workers in the Minneapolis area. Starbucks is trying to wear workers down through its relentless soft union bust. And of course, this is not just happening in Minneapolis. This is anywhere Starbucks, anywhere Howard Schultz's Starbucks is operating. Over 270 unions on a single contract. I'll make this a little bit bigger for folks. Just over 1 year since the first union win in Buffalo, New York, 270 Starbucks stores have unionized and counting. While Starbucks corporate has delayed and stalled at the bargaining table, workers across the country have continued the pressure on the mega coffee chain, complicating its once progressive public image. Though nationally and regionally coordinated strikes and actions, from the Red Cup Rebellion to a boycott of holiday gift cards, the unionized Starbucks workers are resisting the company's effort to wear them down. And especially as we get closer to talk of recession, you hear a lot of layoffs in tech. And I'll just say these guys have been fucking waiting for it and just wishing for an excuse. And of course, we've seen that with inflation. Like, give us an excuse to keep jacking up our prices. But I remember when I was on vacation last summer, hearing about all this stuff of it's a recession. We're a recession, and the eagerness for it to be a recession. Uh, the eagerness for, like, say, us to call it a recession, which is like, oh, we should give some government intervention in the economy and create more safety nets, is entirely different than the reason that say Ted Cruz would say call it a recession, or Howard Schultz wants to call it a recession, which is that, oh, free, I get to fire you excuse card regardless of how much I gave to investors or the previous CEO as he pieced out. A little bit more from this article here. In Minnesota, the first Starbucks, and people will be familiar with this dynamic. It's interesting. I keep thinking about this because I was a barista, and all this stuff is familiar. The being scheduled under availability that you request and that sort of stuff is very familiar, and it's just like the context of, for me, at Caribou Coffee, Moorhead, 35th Street, was we just, even though I was like a progressive, it just wasn't like, oh, we should unionize this. That just wasn't an idea. And I'm ashamed of myself that it wasn't, because like at that point I had already, like, I remember, like, I checked out this book, like, what do unions do? Because like my family wasn't in unions. But I was basically lefty-ish nation reader, so I'm like, unions are probably good, right? But like it never occurred to me to be like, oh yeah, this place I'm working at right fucking now, let's do that here. And I think it's very impressive of these folks. In Minnesota, the first Starbucks union was one at 300 Snelling. I think that's near the guitar pedal store I like. In St. Paul, soon after, oh no, I'm confused. Soon after the workers of 470 announced theirs, Edina also successful union drives in Mall of America and St. Anthony. But the workers behind this wave of unionization in the state now face a stealth war on the part of Starbucks. The company's softer union busting can be difficult to organize against, explains Tinkelberg. At times, leadership can come off as very friendly and even seem supportive of the workers, yet management is meeting with union busting lawyers on a regular basis, he says, and those lawyers are helping them to organize and deny workers pay. Ethan Carson, a barista at 300 Snelling Ave South location, says it feels like his store is always perpetually understaffed, causing stresses for workers and customers. Yet when the Starbucks workers went on their most recent strike on December 16th, the stores conveniently were able to find enough managers and corporate staff to cross the picket lines and keep the store running, he says, a resource that never seems to be available when workers are facing heavy workload and short staffing on an ordinary day. Now, how fucking stupid does management think workers are? That you wouldn't be insanely, maybe more sensitive to that than anything else at work, right? Like, and that's the end of. But I do really recommend people share and read this Workday magazine piece. And that's where we're at. Shout out to that. Let's get her name, Madison Hall. That's so goddamn impressive that you go right to Schultz's face and bring that up to him. I mean, that's the type of energy that actually moves things. That's the type of individual action that actually gets shit done. And it's, you love to see it in the pages of Bloomberg, especially. All right, folks. Patreon.com/leftreckoning. I'm going to do Discord questions after this in the same stream. No post game again tonight. Sorry about that. Our phone service died, so we're going to need a replacement for that. So no phones or voicemails tonight, but I will figure out how to look at Discord. David usually does that, but I'll do that. But here's just a quick interview with Andrew Perez. Get back to do a little bit of welcoming Biden's new chief of staff and say goodbye to Anthony Blinken, maybe. Peace out, folks. See you in a little bit. So we're just going to go right there. Welcome back, Left Reckoners. I'm Matt Leck. With me now is Andrew Perez. Andrew is senior editor and reporter at The Lever, covering money and influence. Folks will have seen Andrew on Left Reckoning before. Thank you so much for coming back, Andrew.
Of course. Thanks for having me.
People should check out The Lever if you don't have a good source for actual substantial journalism that is important topics. I think it's as good as anybody out there. So I just want to get that plug out of there. And in that capacity, you've got two recent articles I wanted to talk about. The first is this one about Semaphore. And basically, Pfizer pays to change the story. I'll share it here. What is the story that we should want to be telling about Pfizer first before we get into how they're trying to obscure it?
Sure. The story, about Pfizer that has been in the news lately, the story that's like actually really important is that they are hiking the price of drugs in the U.S. They just this month went through with price hikes on 99 drug brands in the U.S. And the other thing is they've been talking about it for several months. They're talking about quadrupling the price of their COVID vaccine, moving it from around $30 right now, which is already up from $20 before that. They want to move it to somewhere between $110 and $130 per jab, which, is really expensive. And, they're saying that it's not actually a big deal, that it's going to be covered by people's insurance, but that's just a load of bullshit. In that, of course, consumers are affected by price hikes and
Right.
drugs. Like if you're uninsured, you're going to be paying a hefty list price here, unless you manage to get some kind of special deal or special coupon or something, or the other thing is that when insurers pay the cost of drugs and drug prices increase, that gets passed on to people in the form of premium hikes.
Yeah. And this is sort of, it seems like Pfizer kind of declaring victory on this whole moment where we had to like maybe try to force them to share the intellectual property for some of these things. Like, is it like they've won?
Yeah, definitely. I think they've sort of like announced some nonprofit or sorry that they're going to be like providing some of their drugs at like nonprofit prices to the rest of the world. That's sort of what they're talking about here. Where they want to
Mhm.
bring the conversation is saying like, well, we're actually being really generous abroad right now, which obviously Pfizer and Moderna kind of fought any efforts to share their sort of technology, their COVID vaccine recipe with the rest of the world. I think they've sort of allowed a little bit of movement there, but very, very little.
Yeah.
But the real story here is, outside of maybe the COVID vaccine, like the US pays the highest drug prices in the world, right? Like drug companies have targeted the US for price increases because the government does not negotiate drug prices. We are an outlier in that regard, especially like if you just compare us to like high income countries. We are an outlier there, and that you have to consider most, like nearly every drug that gets approved in the US is funded with, like, the R&D on that, is the research and development is funded by the US government, at least in large part. Or at least, or a portion of it is funded by the US government. So there is no generosity here really. But the other thing is that we pay to help to help develop these drugs, and then we get charged the highest prices, and it's been part of a long-term strategy from the pharmaceutical industry.
Yeah, and so let's talk about this semaphore angle. What is semaphore for folks who haven't come across it yet? And yeah, just introduce that angle first. And
Sure.
and what's Pfizer doing with them?
Yeah, well, so Semaphore is a kind of new media venture. it was launched by Ben Smith, formerly of BuzzFeed, who, I have some respect for Ben. But, the I think one of their biggest investors was Sam Bankman-Fried, the crypto, scammer. He put something like $10 million into the organization as a sort of angel investor. But, now that he is in jail and his money is probably, or sorry, not in jail, but he's under house arrest,
Right.
at his parents' house.
Mhm.
There's some chance that money is going to get clawed back. So they have walled off that money. They're separating it out, and they're sort of doubling down on the other part of this business model, which is sponsored content. And sponsored content, it was sort of created by, or at least popularized by, like, Politico. We've seen several sort of news organizations, get in on this sort of sponsored news model, especially the sponsored newsletter model. Politico, Axios, Punchbowl News. So Semaphore is really kind of into that right now.
Mhm.
Um, and what they did just, last week is they announced this sort of first ever sponsored post that was written to look like a news article. Pfizer got to run an ad. They got to write basically an entire story. It looks like one of their normal stories at Semaphore. But that's what we're looking at here. And in this
Yeah.
in this post, they allowed them to just, basically brag about their generosity, right? And talk about, include all these sort of lines about how, like, where you live shouldn't, decide the quality of your healthcare. And, like, that sounds great. That sounds really nice. But as I was saying, in the US, like, you pay the highest price for drugs in the world. And, like, you do actually have statistically lower health outcomes in the US than in other high income countries.
Mhm.
And that's because, we've allowed this kind of healthcare system that's centered around private health insurance, but we also allow pharmaceutical companies to just gouge us on the medicines that we help pay for.
Yeah, and you point out those sorts of the metrics which America fails by in healthcare, and like that's an important part of the story because like their posts, they're trying to naturalize the sort of problems of American healthcare, acting as if like, okay, you guys you got it so good in America that you're just going to subsidize drugs for all these other countries, but it's like America has an extremely unequal system in itself with massive gaps in coverage that have been dominating our politics for as long as I've been alive. Um, and
Hmm.
and and it's so I mean that they and it's so transparent that why you would want the form of something that looks like news is because people are going to find it more credible.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, I mean, one of the more kind of like amazing things that we write about this sometimes, but, like, so the pharmaceutical industry actually publishes these sort of like annual reports where they talk about barriers to care that are presented by health insurance companies, and, like, how they, like, create, financial barriers to care in terms of, like, out of pocket costs, deductibles, like, and of course they, like, also have these minders who tell you what you can and cannot have, right? Like, what's medically necessary, what isn't. You often at the, in direct contradiction to doctors. Anyway, so they produce these reports about how the health insurance industry erects these barriers to care, but, like, they also, the pharmaceutical industry works hand in hand with, insurance industry lobbyists to make sure that the corporate health insurance dominated US healthcare system stays that way, that nothing fundamentally changes here, right? So, like, they all do a really good job of pointing out, the problems elsewhere, but the problems that are, being uh enacted by their kind of, actual colleagues in preserving this system.
Mm, yeah. Well, let's move on your other article, recent here. This Pete Buttigieg, um, really messing up the airplane ticket situation. Can you just overview that? Because I've flown once since Pete's been, and thankfully didn't have any issues. But I do know people who've had a lot of issues flying. Like, what's going on with our air traffic?
Yeah. Well, I mean, there have been a lot of issues kind
Mhm.
of coalescing right now, but basically, we gave the airlines a lot of money during the pandemic. We, the taxpayers, gave them a lot of money, hoping that they would kind of keep staff, but they ended up shedding staff. And what happened when they came back? When travel sort of really started roaring again. Um, what ended up happening is that these airlines are scheduling flights that they don't have staff for. So, you might get a text, night of, or like, you're about to fly. This happened to me. Like, I was about to fly out at like 8 a.m. or 7 a.m. and I got a text at like 4 in the morning,
Oh,
saying like your flight's canceled. And like this is happening sort of like throughout the industry across the board, and happening with sort of the major US carriers. So that's one big issue. And that's been a constant sort of for the last year.
mhm,
It becomes a bigger issue when more people travel. The other issue was with Southwest Airlines over the holidays. They ended up canceling something like, I think it was like more than 10,000 flights in like a week. And what it was all sort of started. The incident started because there was some like pretty bad weather, some pretty bad winter weather a few days before Christmas. Um, but when that weather passed, every other airline went back to sort of normal operations, but Southwest was still just axing flights left and right, and that's because they have a very antiquated sort of scheduling and software system on the back end, where like they actually just sort of lost track of their staff. Like there was this, like there were these issues where like the staffers are having to call in like on a phone to say like I am at this airport, like it's like the flight that was canceled didn't take off. I am still here, you know?
right.
So anyway, it created this like cascade effect where they had to cancel thousands and thousands of flights. It affected like up to 1 million travelers. And, there was like very, very little conversation, I think, from Southwest to the customers. I think like a lot of customers ended up spending sort of like days in the airport, and
Mm,
then or like, maybe they leave, come back, or they pay to get on another airline and ended up paying like really, really high exorbitant prices. So it was a real giant cluster fuck, really. And it the thing is like Pete in the DOT, the Department of Transportation. So the DOT like is the sole airline regulator, and that's thanks to like a deregulation law passed a few decades ago, that basically shunted any kind of regulatory authority in this area away from even say like state attorneys general,
mm,
to the Department of Transportation. Like they are the sole regulator, and no one else really has any kind of enforcement capacity at all. And you know, state AGs, the attorneys general, as well as like members of Congress, have been calling on the DOT to crack down on some of these really common airline abuses that we've been seeing over the last year, including basically saying like if you are canceling flights, not due to weather, like you owe people a full refund. And yeah, because that was the thing, was when your flights are canceled, they're not actually just giving out refunds. Often they're giving out these like travel credits or vouchers that you can only use in a specified amount of time. Um, but like it's a big scam. It's
yeah.
a really,
I don't
really
get, yeah,
big
exactly. Like
scam.
I can imagine I mean, it's not Christmas anymore, so I don't need that flight. It's not
Yeah.
a wedding anymore. Thanks, for
Yeah,
the voucher.
exactly. Yeah.
And so like what should Pete be doing? Is DOT, like, is that the is there's an advantage to that being if we had the right guy in there, or no? It's yeah.
Well, it's funny. I spoke to a member of Congress recently who basically said this isn't like entirely Pete's fault.
Mhm.
And like his rationale was actually that like Congress put all of this authority at the DOT to regulate the airlines, but like the DOT actually was not really given much enforcement capacity either. So it's created this sort of like really, really lawless system, was his argument. But so the DOT has been working on this. Like they proposed it a while back. This refund rule, basically saying that they have to give full cash refunds. and promptly. None of this like voucher business,
Yeah.
But that rule has been delayed. It's been delayed for like several months. But the other thing is, AGs and these members of Congress have been saying like that rule should also say that should like basically DOT should be imposing big fines if the airlines are canceling these flights that they've don't have staff for, like rather than this sort of like unavoidable weather related delay
Hmm.
or cancellations, like that, like obviously that stuff no one's fault, but like it is your fault if you're scheduling flights and you don't have the staff to
And
to
can I
meet
just
them.
ask, like, from their perspective, they get these vouchers, right? So it's like we have these imaginary flights that we don't have staff for. We'll get people's money, and then we'll come back to them with a voucher for a flight that we actually will staff. Is like, you can see why it benefits them.
Yeah, I mean, of course, like, and again, like, sort of like gift cards. I'm sure a lot of these vouchers expire like unused.
Hmm.
I mean, that was a big issue with gift cards, right? Like that was always a thing where like I think Washington made it illegal to just have your gift card expire after a year or something like that, or have it wind down very quickly, the value. So but yeah, I mean, the broader point here, like people have their flights canceled, they deserve the full refund, and that like they're not always gonna just be like, okay, I can just head back to Florida, several weeks after Christmas. Like you might have missed your shot.
Right.
Yeah.
Andrew Perez, people can follow him, Andrew Perez DC, on Twitter. Is there anything you want to preview that you have coming up, or you don't need to do that for us? But also, people should give him a follow.
We've got a good restaurant story. So just be on the lookout.
Awesome. Thanks, Andrew.
Thank you.
Mix that audio a little bit aggressively. They got a restaurant piece that folks want to look forward to. Yeah, Andrew Perez, the lever guys are great. Also, they lost to Alex Salmon. Was he at the lever? No, he was at the prospect. Anyway, great journalism, folks. Let's talk a little bit about Jeff Zients, who is Biden's new chief of staff. Now, I dumbly had gotten Ron Klain mixed up in my head with Anthony Blinken, Secretary of State. I did that because I'm always eager to play Blinken's lip service song. But unfortunately, they're different guys. But this new guy, let's meet him a little bit. Speaking of McKinseyite managers, huh? Let's get some more of those guys in here, because the Mayor Pete stuff. And I apologize also for my pronunciation of Pete's last name. Buttigieg is, I believe, the guy that they said. I always say Buttigieg. Anyway, fire Jeff Zients. Biden's Kodenzar has gone from Mr. Fix-It to Grim Reaper. This is a year ago. This is before he gets this promotion. Mr. Fix-It to Grim Reaper, steering the administration's pandemic response to catastrophic lows. Zients isn't a public health expert. He's a former corporate executive whose track record bolsters the worst possible impulses for a Biden appointee in command. Also, like all the COVID minimizing losers, congratulations. I guess you pushed Biden left on this. This guy doesn't think it's that big of a deal either. He's a former corporate executive whose track record bolsters the worst possible impulses for a Biden appointee in command of the federal government's resources. He cut his teeth at Bain & Co., a consulting firm that works closely with the private equity industry, which has erased pensions and health benefits for tens of thousands over decades of leveraged buyouts. There, he made a name for himself running a pair of management consultancies where he advised CEOs to be blunt with their employees. The social contract is never coming back, and your employees know it. That's an interesting thing to say. Like, what is that? Anyway, that's the Romney tied firm, right? That's shutting down, and among other places, Toys R Us. Another Obama-era grifter, Rahm Emanuel, hit on the key to Zients' success when he glowingly described him and his cohort, including Vivek Kundra and Anish Chopra, as, quote, the McKinsey boys for their slash-and-burn mentality toward government bureaucracy and spending under the auspices of management sagacity. That's what we need. With DPA powers legally trusted, the Defense Production Act, that's what DPA stands for, powers legally entrusted to Zions, a mass mobilization unseen since the Second World War was potentially at his fingertips. He could have spent the year mobilizing against a shared enemy in the virus, stockpiling enough personal protective equipment and pharmaceutical products to protect the public. But Zions has, for the most part, this is regards to the 2021 fall, could have spent the year mobilizing and shared the enemy of the virus, stockpiling enough personal protective equipment and pharmaceutical products to protect the public, but Zions has, for the most part, abdicated this responsibility. Most damning among Zions' failures is his refusal to allocate resources to aid vaccination efforts abroad. As Vice News, this is why also we don't respect our anti-vax friends, because it's hard to argue that, yes, we should be expanding this life-saving cure to people broadly, if you think it's actually causing people to drop dead because you're a moron and you saw something online. That's all I have to say about that. If there's somebody in the chat that's on that, you can ban them. He could have spent a year mobilizing against a shared enemy in the virus, stockpiling enough personal protective equipment and pharmaceutical products to protect the public. But Zions has, for the most part, abdicated this responsibility. Most damning, yes, we got that. Tito's, as Vice News reported, last year, Tito's Vodka has donated more toward efforts to mass produce an open source global vaccine than the White House. Global vaccine distribution is not only a humanitarian requirement, but also a crucial step in preventing the development of new variants. But doing so would have angered powerful forces in corporate America who don't give a fuck that you are spreading bullshit because a football player had a heart attack on the field and you're saying it's vaccine. Guess what? Pfizer don't give a fuck, you idiot. Zion's personal playbook has long revolved around parachuting into high-profile operational quagmire. This is great. Hiring experienced software engineers and then grandstanding over their work. Zion's first claimed credit for saving Obama's Cash for Clunkers website, paying Oracle even more money to fix a problem that they themselves had created. And then again for hiring engineers to fix the catastrophic healthcare.gov rollout. As engineers fixed protocols behind the scenes, Zion's brought them pie, watched them work, and placed a national cover story celebrating his genius. That this guy, I mean, it's one thing that the website rollout, the website rollout of Obamacare. This guy also the Cash for Clunkers moment too, and like if something doesn't sum up the shabbiness of that generation, this generation, the generation that exists in Hakeem Jeffries, I'm sure, that the shabby imagination of that generation of liberals, it's Cash for Clunkers. And you compare what we did at a time of desperate need for government investment in infrastructure and low interest rates, thanks to our Federal Reserve. What we did with that is fucking Cash for Clunkers, and China look at their high-speed rail in that same time. But yeah, so that's who this guy is. So another in the Pete Buttigieg line of corporate vampire consultants. Not a good sign, I would say. So, I mean, which is not to say that Klain was probably a great guy. I'll leave it to somebody more plugged in, probably at the American Prospect or the Lever, to write that obituary. But things still bad, I guess, is ending there. I'm going to go to the Discord now, folks. Oh, yeah, let's see. Yeah, we'll do that. If there's any questions, again, I can't do calls. I don't know what happened with our Twilio server, but I think it is. I think it died because nothing shows up, and that never happens. I'll refresh it again, but I think I got it. I think I got an email that I probably should have responded to, but we needed to replace that anyway. We need to have something. With patrons, we do the meetups every once in a while on Zoom and get a whole bunch of people on there. I feel like we need to do something like that. You guys aren't in the Discord. I'd let you in the Discord. How do I let you in the Discord? If somebody can let them into the Discord, look, I need to get in the Discord a little bit more. I apologize for not being in there very often. I mean, I'm pretty open about whoever wants to be in the Discord can be in the Discord, even though it is technically a patron thing. Like, get in there. Who cares about I'm not an intellectual property person. I promise, no matter if I become a New York Times bestseller, you can torrent that shit as widely as you please. I appreciate it. And thank you for it. I don't see any questions in the live show Q&A yet, but let's see here. Let's watch this Tim Pool video too. I'll pull it up. If you just bear with me for a second, folks. Tim Pool's survival. Actually, let's get a copyright strike, shall we? This is good enough. We got a challenge. We got worth like the rigmarole of challenging it. If this episode goes down, and I don't know how you wouldn't be able to hear this, but if you're, yeah, that's a kind of a conundrum if YouTube takes us down because of copyright. But I will just say, we post the video podcast to Spotify, which is something I think is actually kind of cool. It's very simple that does it, but it's cool to me that our show's on Spotify like that, regardless of other bullshit. You can watch it on there if this episode, we have to remove it or something like that. But exactly a year at Future Canon points this out on Twitter. It is a year since Paris Hilton went on Jimmy Fallon, and this ensued.
Yeah,
Some great late night content. Oh crap! I just lost my headphones. One second, folks. God damn it. But while I'm adjusting here, the folks should repent. My opinion, because all that was a sales pitch for a scam. And at that time, it was a scam that maybe people could have got in on, and could have. Oh crap. Okay, I'm still coming through. Sorry, I had to change speakers there. And could have, resold to the next fool and made a profit from. But now we know that shit was going to collapse quick. I mean, and it's annoying. Like that is, yeah. You should repent, Jimmy, Paris Hilton, of selling that shit. There's this Max Reed article. Trying to find it. I just remembered that that came out after this by Max Reed, right? And his talent agencies and crypto. Let's see here. Oh yeah, maxreed.substack.com, mapping the celebrity NFT complex. Go check out that if you want the the inside dope on what was actually going on there. I'm going to check, folks, if there's some Discord questions. See what we got here. Am I not looking at it right? Or I'll just read the chat here. Sloppy Drunk, is that a dig at me, the artist? Because I can't really disagree with that. Okay, Discord link in the chat. It could be a free Discord day. Look at that. While David's gone, I throw all of our business strategy out the window. Let me see if I can get that for y'all. Actually, let's just do it in the chat. I think I can do that, but don't switch the device. I worry that my lack of okay, there's the Left Reckoning Discord. Okay, I'm going to put a link in the chat here for folks. I know there's a lot of dead air. I apologize. I don't know how to do it. Invite people. Okay. Okay. Expires in 7 days. But welcome, folks. You're welcome. Am I looking in? Let's see. Well, I'm just going to read the discussion because Strom's talking about the Yardbirds. The Yardbirds recorded a better, yeah. The Yardbirds. I remember when I was really getting into guitar, hearing about the Yardbirds. It's like, what if Magic Johnson, Larry Bird, and uh, Bill Russell all played on the same team? Right? Like, who's on that? I okay. So do I have any questions in the chat while they populate? I don't know. Actually, Joanna might not be here, right? So we might not be able to do even Discord questions. But folks, I want to thank y'all for being here. If you got a question you want to post it in the chat, do it now. You got a little bit, and I'll see it. Billy's saying no. I don't think there's any questions. We got another show for patrons on Sunday. Apologize for not having one this Sunday. I'm not sure. I know people are curious about audio for the live show. I some contractual stuff with the venue where I don't think we wanted to do the fee that it would cost. Didn't quite make sense monetarily. So, but maybe we have some audio or something later. I'm not sure. I'm not, trying to be evasive. I generally don't know. But yeah, we've got a few things coming up. David, I believe, has some Southern history stuff. I got some AI stuff I want to do. I'm not quite bought in on the AI. AI is going to become all the lawyers. I don't really buy it. We'll see. I want to talk to somebody, have a little skeptic powwow about that. And also, we're going to finish our Rosa reading. Or not finish. I think we might do 3 parts of that. Is it listed in the patron normally? Is what listed? Oh, the live shows. We typically have tried to get the live shows in there. Normally. And I'm actually not taking questions from Discord chat, Autumn, because I don't think the Discord chat is working. So, you're gonna start DeLillo next week, Billy Big Bricks. That's very cool. Yeah, Libra is I'd probably worth a reread on Libra for me, honestly. The passage that really sticks out to me always is the Stalin Man of Steel sort of essay. Understanding of other leaders. What is it about pillheads that gives them such a great taste in literature? I'm not sure what that's referring to, Billy Big Bricks. Hope that's not slander of another chatter, or we don't really know what that is. Folks, I am going to peace out. That link didn't work, Pizza Caddy. Sorry about that. Yeah, I'm trying to figure out something. We'll try to get our Discord growing a little bit. I know the majority of part 1 has left us in the dust with all that promotion. Some people are just good at promoting stuff. All right, folks. See ya. This Sunday for patrons, patreon.com/leftreckoning.